Ashford wakes again under a veil of fog, and with it another mystery. A letter with no return address pulls Detective Drake Vane into the shadows of the Corvin family. Whispers of a niece's death, a mark on her throat, and a secret buried beneath the old well. But behind the grief lies something older, darker, a circle bound by blood and silence. What began as a plea for justice may awaken a legend the city was never meant to remember. You're listening to Audible Archives, the home of dark tales and original mysteries, written by Raul. If you enjoy stories where the fog hides more than it reveals, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's step into the mist and open the letter with no return address.
Ashford was still under morning fog when the envelope slid under Drake's flat door. No name, no return, just urgent, to be read at once, scrawled across it in the hurried hand of someone afraid they'd lose their nerve if they stopped to breathe. Drake sat at the small kitchen table, tea cooling beside him, and slit the envelope with the old folding knife he'd carried since the army. Inside, one sheet of cheap paper, creased twice. Detective Vane. They say the dead can't speak. I think they can. My niece is dead, and they call it suicide. They are wrong. If you believe in truth, come to St. Peter's Close before nightfall. I'll be waiting by the West Gate. L.C. St. Peter's Close was old Ashford. Before the trams, before the smokestacks, before the city was more metal than stone, it had been the parish that buried its own. The West Gate led to the churchyard, a place for the forgotten. Drake read the letter twice. The initials, the phrasing, they felt deliberate, as if the writer feared their words would be read by more than the intended eyes. He finished his tea, shrugged into his overcoat, and checked his revolver. He didn't expect trouble in daylight, but in Ashford, daylight was just a thin veil over the rest of it. The fog clung to the tramlines as he made his way toward the close. By the time he reached the West Gate, he saw her, a tall woman in a heavy black coat, scarf knotted tight, one gloved hand gripping the wrought iron bars as if holding herself steady. "Detective Vane?" she asked when he approached. Her voice carried an edge, not fear exactly, but the kind of tension that comes from having lived too long with unanswered questions. "Mrs. L.C. Miss," she corrected. "Lydia Corvin." She glanced over her shoulder toward the churchyard. "It's my niece, Emily. They found her in her room 3 days ago. Doctor says she poisoned herself. The constable says the same. But I saw her, detective. There was a mark on her throat, like a thumb pressed too hard." Drake studied her face. "You told anyone else?" "I told them," Lydia said, bitterness sharpening her words. "They told me to keep my mouth shut before I ruined her good name." Drake nodded slowly. "Then let's ruin some names." That was the moment. The first step into a case that would drag him deep into Ashford's oldest streets, through whispers of family curses, and toward a truth buried as carefully as anybody in St. Peter's ground. The Corvin house stood at the far end of Weller's Lane, where the cobblestones ran uneven and the street lamps leaned like old drunks. It was the kind of place that kept its curtains drawn even in daylight, the kind where sound seemed reluctant to linger. Lydia unlocked the front door without a word, and Drake stepped into the stale air of a house that had been holding its breath for too long. The entrance hall was narrow, lined with oil paintings whose subjects all shared the same sharp jaw and cold, watchful eyes. Family portraits, each one staring out like they knew the viewer's secrets. "Emily's room is upstairs," Lydia said, her voice low. "But I thought you might want to see where they laid her out first." She led him into a sitting room with lace-covered tables and an unlit hearth. The blinds were half closed, letting in thin slats of gray light. On a low table in the corner sat a small framed photograph, a young woman, maybe 19, dark-haired, with a smile that looked like it had been coaxed rather than given. Drake leaned closer. "This her?" "Yes." Lydia's eyes stayed on the photo. Emily had a quiet way about her, but she wasn't sad. Not like they're saying. She had plans. Drake glanced around the room. Who else lives here? My brother, Jonathan. Emily's father. He's upstairs now. My sister-in-law, Margaret, passed years ago. The only other person here is Mrs. Black, the housekeeper. Been with us since before Emily was born. He heard footsteps overhead, slow, deliberate. Jonathan Corvin appeared in the doorway a moment later. Tall, thin, with the kind of pale skin that looked like it had never seen a factory floor. His eyes went first to Drake, then to Lydia. "This is the detective you wrote to?" His tone was cold enough to frost the air. "I asked him to come," Lydia replied. Jonathan's gaze sharpened on Drake. "We've already spoken to the authorities. My daughter's death was a tragedy, but it was her choice. There's nothing to be gained by dredging it up." Drake stepped forward. "Mr. Corvin, I'm here because your sister believes the official story doesn't fit. I'd like to see Emily's room." Jonathan's jaw worked, but he stepped aside without another word. Upstairs, Emily's room was neat. Too neat. The bed was made with military precision, the desk bare except for a single book, a collection of psalms, its spine creased at the middle. But Drake's attention went to the window. The latch was unfastened, and the sill bore faint scratches, as though something had scraped against it. "You said they found her in here?" he asked. Lydia nodded. "On the bed. They said she drank poison." Drake crouched beside the nightstand. There was no glass, no cup, no bottle, nothing to suggest she'd taken anything here. He straightened slowly. People who take their own life don't usually clean up after themselves. Lydia's eyes flickered toward the door. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Drake murmured, "that someone staged this room." The Corvin family crypt lay at the far end of St. Peter's churchyard, its stone steps slick with moss, its wrought iron gate groaning when Drake pulled it open. Lydia had met him there after sundown, a ring of keys clutched tight in her hand. "You're certain the coffin hasn't been sealed?" Drake asked. "They're waiting for the coroner's final paperwork before burial," Lydia replied. Jonathan insisted on keeping her here until then. Inside, the crypt smelled of damp stone and candle wax. Shadows swayed along the walls as Lydia lit a lantern from a taper. Emily's coffin rested on a central slab, its lid closed but not screwed down. Drake removed his gloves, lifted the lid, and set it gently aside. Emily lay in white silk, her dark hair arranged over her shoulders, her skin pale as moonlight. He examined her face first. No bruising, no swelling, but when he tilted her head slightly to the side, he saw it, a faint, yellowing impression just below the jawline. Oval, with the ridged pattern of human skin. Lydia sucked in a breath. "You see it, don't you?" "I see it," Drake said quietly. "And I've seen it before." Pressure from a thumb, applied while the other fingers gripped the opposite side. Not enough to crush the windpipe, but enough to cut off air. He shifted his attention to her right hand. A thin trace of reddish-brown powder clung beneath 2 fingernails. Not blood, finer, almost metallic. He scraped some into a paper packet from his coat pocket. "Could be residue from wherever she fought back," Drake murmured. "Fought back," Lydia echoed. "People don't scratch at clean air," Drake replied. He leaned closer to her ear, noting a faint smell, bitter almond, mingled with something oily. "Cyanide," he said. "But it's masked. Whoever gave it to her mixed it with something else. Something meant to throw off anyone who knows the signs." Lydia's hands trembled around the lantern. "Then it wasn't suicide." "No," Drake said, lowering the coffin lid. "It was careful work. Which means we're dealing with someone who's done this before, or someone who's studied it." As they left the crypt, a figure stood just outside the gate, watching. A man in a long coat, his hat brim low over his face. When Drake stepped toward him, the man turned and melted into the fog without a word. Mrs. Black answered the door as if she had been expecting him, which was odd, considering Drake hadn't told anyone he was coming. She was a tall, thin woman in her 60s, with hair pinned so tightly it pulled at the corners of her eyes. Her black dress was spotless, her hands folded neatly in front of her apron. "Detective Vane," she said, in a voice that was neither warm nor cold. "I suppose you'll want tea." The kitchen was the warmest room in the Corvin house, though the fire in the stove was banked low. Mrs. Black poured tea into a chipped china cup and set it before him. She didn't sit. "I've worked for this family 37 years, she began. "I know the pattern of every creak in these floors. That night," she hesitated, fingers brushing her apron, "the house didn't sound right." "How so?" Drake asked. "I was in my room just off the pantry when I heard voices on the landing. One was Miss Emily's. The other," Mrs. Black's eyes drifted toward the ceiling, "was low, deliberate. A man's voice, not Mr. Corvin's." Drake sipped the tea. What time was this? 11:30. She'd been upstairs since dinner. She wasn't the sort to entertain visitors at that hour. Mrs. Black stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then there was a sound, not a shout, not even loud, like someone gasping. After that, silence. "I went up after a few minutes, and the landing was empty. Miss Emily's door was shut. I knocked. No answer." "You didn't go in?" Drake asked. "Mr. Corvin was particular about her privacy," she said stiffly. "I thought, if she wanted to speak to me, she'd call." Drake studied her. "You mentioned knowing every creak in this house. Did you hear anyone leave?" "No. And that's the strangest part. The front door never opened." He leaned back. "Which means either your visitor left another way, or they never left at all." Mrs. Black's lips tightened. "There's something else you should know. Years ago, before Emily was born, there was talk in the family about a scandal. Mr. Corvin's sister, not Miss Lydia, another one, vanished after a quarrel with their father. Some say she ran off. Others said the well on the property wasn't dug for water." Drake set his cup down, the china clinking softly. "And you believe that has something to do with Emily?" Mrs. Black hesitated, then said, "In this family, detective, the past doesn't go away. It waits. Quietly." The fog over Ashford's outskirts was thick enough to bead on Drake's coat as he leaned against the crumbling garden wall of the Corvin estate. The house loomed ahead, its windows lit only in the library where Jonathan Corvin kept his late-night reading vigils. Drake's plan was simple: watch, wait, and see if Mrs. Black's low, deliberate visitor had reason to return. By 11:30, the library light snapped off. A dim glow appeared in the hall upstairs, Emily's room. Drake felt his pulse slow into that familiar watchfulness, the army-bred patience that had served him in far darker alleys than this. Then, movement. A shadow crossed the landing, slipping into Emily's room without so much as a knock. Too small and slim to be Jonathan Corvin. Whoever it was carried no light. Drake moved. He skirted the hedgerow, entered through the service door Mrs. Black had left unlatched, and crept up the back stairs. His shoes made no sound on the worn runner. From the threshold of Emily's room, he heard faint scraping, wood against wood, as if something were being pulled from under the bed. He stepped in, revolver low. "You've got 2 seconds to explain what you're looking for." The figure froze, then slowly rose. It was Lydia Corvin. Her hair was loose, her eyes wide, and in her hands was a small cedar box. "Drake," she started, but stopped when she saw the gun. "Put it on the desk," Drake said. She obeyed. The box was worn smooth, its brass clasp tarnished, and when he flipped it open he found it empty except for a folded scrap of paper. He unfolded it. 3 words, written in a tight, slanted hand: "The well remembers." Lydia's voice was barely above a whisper. "It was under her bed. I swear I didn't know it was there before tonight." "Then who were you expecting to find it?" Drake asked. Her eyes darted to the window. "Not me. Him." "Him being the man Mrs. Black heard?" She nodded once, sharply. "I've been waiting for him to come back. Whoever he is, he's the reason Emily's dead." Somewhere outside, near the orchard, a twig snapped. Drake crossed to the window in time to see a figure slip between the trees, moving toward the old stone well at the edge of the property. He turned back to Lydia. "Stay here, and keep that box in sight." The orchard's damp grass muffled Drake's steps, but the fog made tracking the shadow ahead a slow, careful pursuit. Whoever the figure was, they moved with practiced stealth, not a panicked trespasser, but someone who had done this before. The old well stood in a clearing beyond the last row of apple trees. Its stonework was pitted with age, the rope long gone, the opening capped with a rusted iron grate. Drake stayed in the darkness, letting his eyes adjust. The stranger knelt at the well, producing a small metal hook. In seconds, the padlock on the grate gave way with a muted snap. The iron cover groaned open. Drake waited until the figure leaned inside before stepping forward. "You've got 1 chance to tell me your name before I haul you up by the collar." The man spun around, knife in hand, face hidden behind a scarf. Drake saw the blade flash, a quick, low slash meant to buy an escape. He caught the man's wrist, twisted, and sent the knife clattering into the grass. A brief, vicious struggle followed. The stranger was wiry and fast, but Drake's grip was all discipline and leverage. Within seconds, the man was bent against the well wall, breath ragged. "Name," Drake repeated. The scarf slipped. A narrow face, unshaven, eyes darting like a cornered rat. "Call me Rowan," he said finally. "You the one who visited Emily?" Rowan gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Visited? No. I warned her." Drake kept him pinned with one hand and nodded toward the open well. "What's down there?" Rowan's gaze flicked to the darkness below. "What should have stayed buried." With a grimace, Rowan reached into his coat and produced a length of cord with a loop at one end. "Lower me," he said. "I'll show you. Or you can watch it fall into the wrong hands." Drake hesitated, weighing the risk. Then, keeping his revolver drawn, he secured the cord to the well frame and let Rowan descend. The rope creaked, the fog swallowing his figure until only the faint sound of boots on stone echoed up. Minutes later, the rope jerked twice, the signal to pull. Drake braced and hauled Rowan back into the night air. The man's hands clutched something wrapped in oilcloth, about the size of a thick ledger. Rowan peeled the cloth back to reveal a leather-bound journal, its cover warped from damp. In the center was a brass emblem, a stylized eye inside a 7-pointed star. Drake had seen that symbol before. Not in police records, but in a war zone, painted on the inside of a smuggler's crate, and later on the signet ring of a corpse found in no man's land. Rowan's eyes met his. "This is why Emily died. And why you'll be next if you're not careful." Back in the Corvin library, the the fire had burned down to embers. Drake sat in the high-backed chair, the leather-bound journal between his hands. Lydia lingered near the door, her eyes flicking to Rowan, now seated under Mrs. Black's guarded watch, his wrists bound with a length of curtain cord. The brass emblem on the cover caught the firelight, an eye nested inside a 7-pointed star. Its edges were dulled, but the design had a strange depth, as though it had been pressed into the leather with more force than mere decoration. Drake turned the cover. The first page bore no name, only a date, May 12, 1873, nearly 50 years ago. Below it, a sentence written in the same tight, slanted hand as the note from Emily's cedar box. Those who drink from the well will remember, and they will serve. The pages that followed were dense with entries, coded lists of names, crude maps of Ashford's older districts, symbols Drake didn't recognize, and scattered phrases in Latin. He paused at a sketch of the Corvin Estates orchard. The well was marked with the same 7-pointed star. Rowan's voice broke the silence. That book's been passed through more hands than you can count. Always with a death at the handoff. Emily was meant to keep it hidden. She got careless. Lydia's lips thinned. Or she trusted the wrong person. Drake looked up from the journal. And who would that be? Rowan shrugged. Could be anyone in this house. Could be someone who's already watching us through the window. Mrs. Black bristled. I lock those shutters every night. Ignoring the exchange, Drake flipped toward the back of the journal. The final pages contained a series of entries all dated within the past month. The last one read, "He walks Ashford again. The pact is to be renewed." Drake closed the book with deliberate care. Who's he? Rowan's expression tightened. The man who founded the circle. No one knows his true name. Some call him the ferryman. The word hit Drake like a cold draft. In his army days, ferryman had been a whispered code name for a figure who moved between smuggling rings, black market arms dealers, and cult-like societies. Always a ghost, never confirmed. And if Rowan was right, the ferryman had roots here in Ashford, and an interest in the Corvin well. Drake rose, tucking the journal into his coat. You're going to tell me everything you know about this circle, and about Emily's last days. And you're going to do it now, before whoever killed her decides we're next on the list. The wind rattled the shutters as Rowan began to talk. His voice was low, not from fear, but from the instinct of someone used to speaking in places where walls had ears. The circle began before Ashford had tramlines, Rowan said. Back when the furnace quarter was still a swamp and the docks were no more than rotting planks. They weren't thieves or killers at first. They were the city's founders, merchants and engineers, bound by a promise to share any fortune they uncovered. He glanced toward the well in the orchard. The pact was sealed here. They called it the Pact of Seven, after the 7 signatories. The water was just water, but the act, the ritual, that was the anchor. Every few decades, it had to be renewed. Drake leaned forward. And this ferryman? No one knows how old he really is, Rowan replied. But his hand's been in every renewal. People say he's the last original member. Others say he's just a name passed down, a title. Either way, the man who bears it always comes when the cycles do. Mrs. Black folded her arms. And this has to do with Emily's death, how? Rowan's eyes didn't leave Drake. She found proof that the circle wasn't just about money. They controlled the city's courts, the shipyards, even the police in the old days. Some of that power never went away. She planned to take the journal to someone she trusted in the homicide division. Drake's jaw tightened. Not me. She didn't know you were back in Ashford, Rowan said. She thought she'd be safer if the journal went through another channel. And instead, Lydia said softly, it got her killed. Drake flipped the journal open again, finding the crude maps. One showed the furnace quarter, with 7 dots scattered across it. Another marked the underworks, the forgotten tunnels beneath Ashford streets. Each dot bore the star and eye symbol. Rowan nodded toward the map. Those are the meeting sites. 7 spots, 1 for each founder's bloodline. Only 4 are still standing. The renewal takes place at whichever is most hidden. And you think this time it's the well, Drake said. Rowan's voice dropped to a whisper. Not think. No. The ferryman is already in Ashford. He's here to bring the circle back together. Drake stood, tucking the journal into his coat. Then we cut the cycle before it starts. You're taking me to the other sites. Rowan smirked faintly. You've got steel, detective. But you'll need more than a revolver to walk where the circle treads. Drake's eyes were hard. I've walked worse roads. The grate gave way with a groan, and stale air rushed out like the breath of something long buried. Drake swung his lantern down into the darkness, catching the gleam of damp brickwork and the glistening curve of a tunnel. Welcome to the underworks, Rowan muttered, lowering himself down the rusted ladder. Ashford's veins, built before the tramlines, before half the streets above had names. Forgotten by most, except the circle. Drake followed, boots scraping on iron rungs slick with condensation. The smell hit first, wet stone, rotting wood, and a faint metallic tang like blood on old copper. The tunnel stretched ahead, vanishing into black. Their footsteps echoed, the sound swallowed by the curve of the brick. Rowan pointed to a faded marking on the wall, the 7-pointed star and the all-seeing eye. They mark their paths. This one's fresh. Means the ferryman's people have been here within days. They moved deeper, the air cooling until their breath misted. Twice, Drake paused, lantern beam catching movement at the edge of sight, a shadow flitting behind a pillar, a ripple in the dark. Rowan noticed his stillness. Don't chase them. If someone's down here, they know every turn. We stick to the route. Eventually, the tunnel widened into a chamber. Broken crates lay scattered, their contents long gone. But in the center was something new. A figure slumped against the wall, head bowed, arms spread limply. Drake approached cautiously, lantern lifting. The man's eyes were open but glassy, skin pale as parchment. His lips were blue, a smear of blackish residue staining his chin. Rowan swore under his breath. Toll water. Drake's brow furrowed. What? A poison the circle uses. A drop in the mouth and you're gone before you can cry out. It's their way of collecting a debt. Drake scanned the body, noting the bruising on the wrists. He wasn't just killed. He was questioned first. Rowan nodded grimly. Looks like the ferryman's already gathering names. Anyone who knew Emily, anyone who might know where she hid other pieces of the truth. As they turned to leave, Drake spotted something glinting beneath the corpse's hand. Kneeling, he pried it loose. A brass token engraved with a star and eye on one side, and the number 6 on the other. Rowan's eyes narrowed. The 6th seat. One of the circle's places is empty. That means someone new is being invited in. Drake pocketed the token. Then we find out who before they take the 7th seat. Ashford's reign had a way of feeling heavier after the underworks, as if the city knew what you'd seen and wanted to wash it off you before you went any further. Drake didn't let it slow him. Back at his flat above the tea shop, he spread the map from Emily's journal across the kitchen table, lantern light pooling over its stained paper. The brass token lay at the center like a chess piece waiting for its move. He poured 2 cups of black tea, one for himself, one for Rowan, who sat opposite, tapping a cigarette against his palm but never lighting it. "Sixth seat," Drake said. "If the circle's bringing in a new member now, they'd want someone with reach, influence they don't already have." Rowan nodded. "Political, financial, or criminal muscle. Ideally, all 3. Drake's mind ticked through names. City council members, dock bosses, heads of the old families. Then one name slid forward, uninvited but undeniable. "Inspector Markham," Drake said. Rowan frowned. "Your own chief." "Think about it," Drake said. "Markham's been pushing for more control over homicide cases linked to the docks. If he had circle backing, he could lock down any investigation that got too close." Rowan sipped his tea. "Makes sense. But if he's only being invited in, he might not know the full extent of what he's stepping into. That's your window." Drake's jaw tightened. "And if he already knows, it means the circle's inside the department now." They planned quickly. Rowan would track the old meeting sites marked on the journal's map. Drake would shadow Markham, watching for any move that might lead to the ferryman. 2 nights later, under the dim glow of a tram stop lamp, Drake spotted Markham leaving the station in plain clothes. No driver, no official car, just a flat cap pulled low and a heavy coat that looked borrowed. Drake followed at a distance, keeping to shadows. Markham moved like a man trying not to be noticed, cutting down narrow lanes and slipping into the back entrance of a shuttered ironworks. Drake waited, counting the seconds, then crept to the doorway. Inside, the ironworks was quiet, save for the faint murmur of voices. Lantern light spilled in slats through an office window. He edged closer, catching just enough to freeze him in place. Markham's voice. And another, smooth, deliberate, old as stone. The ferryman. The old ironworks smelled of rust and damp, the air thick enough to taste. Drake kept to the shadows along the wall, one hand resting lightly on the hilt of his folding knife, the other bracing against cold steel. Through the cracked pane of the office door, he could see them. Markham standing stiff, hat in hand, and across the desk, a man who could have stepped out of one of the city's oldest ghost stories. The ferryman's face was obscured by the brim of a wide black hat, but his voice was as deliberate as the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. "Ferryman, the circle does not offer twice. The 6th seat is yours, should you choose it. With it comes protection and responsibility. Markham, and the price." A thin smile curved under the ferryman's shadow. "Ferryman, a case. One currently under your watch. You will bury it. The witnesses will forget they saw anything. The file will vanish like smoke." Drake's pulse slowed, his mind already reaching for possibilities. Which case? Which victim? Then the ferryman named it. Emily Rowe. Drake's fingers curled into a fist. Emily's death wasn't just a loose end for him, it was the start of the web that had pulled him back into Ashford's underbelly. And now, it was the circle's bargaining chip. Markham. "And if I refuse?" "Ferryman, you won't. You see, Inspector, the circle has been watching you since your first day in uniform. Every promotion, every compromise, every corner you've cut, we know them all. The 6th seat would make you untouchable. Without it." The pause was deliberate. Heavy. "Ferryman, you'd be a file in someone else's desk." Markham looked down at the floor, jaw working. Drake knew that look, the weighing of survival against conscience. When Markham finally spoke, his voice was low. "Markham, I'll need time. Ferryman, you have 3 nights. On the 4th, the seat is filled, or the river takes its due." The meeting ended without ceremony. Markham left first, his shoulders hunched under the weight of the choice. The ferryman stayed seated, as if he had all the time in the world. Drake slipped away before either could see him, every step measured. 3 nights. 3 nights to stop a man from selling out his badge, and to cut one of the circle's strings before it tightened around the city's throat. The clock on Drake Vane's brass watch ticked past midnight, the crack in its glass catching the lamplight like a scar. 3 nights. That's all the ferryman had given Markham. That's all Drake had to cut the circle's hold before it sealed shut. Night 1. The mark. Drake shadowed Markham from sunrise to last tram. The man worked like any other day. Files, briefings, an arrest in the market quarter. But Drake saw the change. Markham spoke less, smoked more, checked over his shoulder. He was already living in the ferryman's shadow. At a dingy cafe on Brass Street, Markham slipped an envelope across the table to a courier in a dockman's cap. Drake followed. The courier delivered the envelope to a closed haberdashery, one that Drake knew from Emily's map was a circle drop point. Inside the envelope, a witness list. Emily Rose case. Night 2. The witness. One name jumped out from the list. Maura Ellen, a seamstress who'd lived 2 doors from Emily. Her statement had been thin, almost rehearsed. Drake decided to hear it again. He found her in a backroom tailor shop, working under a single bulb. At first, she claimed she'd seen nothing. Then Drake set his service revolver on the table. Not threatening, just there. Drake, you're scared of the wrong man, Maura. The ferryman can't save you when the circle's done with you. But I can. Her hands shook as she threaded the needle. Words came in whispers. She'd seen Emily the night she died, arguing with a man wearing a silver lapel pin in the shape of a crescent. Not Markham. Not anyone from the precinct. Someone older. Sharper. The ferryman. Night 3. The bait. Drake knew the circle would meet somewhere the ferryman could control the exits. He also knew Markham wouldn't show unless he believed he could walk away clean. So Drake wrote his own invitation. He forged the ferryman's handwriting. Every looping stroke matched to the notes in Emily's journal. The message was simple. 6th seat. Foundry at Crane Wharf. Midnight. He made sure it landed in Markham's in-tray before lunch. Midnight brought rain. The old foundry loomed over Crane Wharf like a rusted cathedral. Markham arrived alone, shoulders squared, jaw tight. Inside, lanterns lit the floor. And there, seated at a steel desk, was not the ferryman, but Drake Vane. Drake, you've got a choice, Markham. Take the seat, and you're theirs forever. Walk away, and you've got me, and everything I know about that witness list, keeping you alive. Markham, you don't understand. Drake, I understand enough. The ferryman's not here because I made sure he couldn't be. You're free to go, but so's my evidence, and it'll surface the second you take their offer. Markham looked at the door, at Drake, at the rain streaking down the foundry's broken windows. Then he turned and walked out without a word. The 6th seat went unfilled. For now, the ferryman would know someone had moved against him, and Drake knew it wouldn't be long before the circle tested him again. Back at his flat, he poured a measure of coal-aged whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light like molten metal. Somewhere in Ashford, the ferryman was already planning his next move, and Drake would be waiting.
The fog never clears in Ashford, it only deepens, a death that wasn't suicide, a journal marked by a 7-pointed star, and the whisper of the ferryman walking the streets once more. Detective Drake Vane has uncovered only the first layer of the circle's secrets, but already the city stirs with unseen hands. If you want to follow him deeper into the shadows, make sure you like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Audible Archives. Your support keeps these mysteries alive and ensures the story continues until the next case file opens.
Another chapter closes, but the archives remain, waiting for the next seeker of stories. Here, no voice is lost, no tale truly ends. This is Audible Archives. Until we meet again, may your mind wander freely and your heart never forget the stories we share.